The air in the ancient subterranean chamber was cold, dry and heavy, with the scent of petrified papyrus and something else, something indefinable, like the faint echo of primordial creation itself. A single, slender beam of starlight, fractured by a hidden aperture carved with celestial precision, illuminated a colossal stone tablet that dominated the center of the sanctum. Upon its surface, etched in cuneiform so ancient it predated the known dynasties, were not separate figures, but a singular, breathtaking scene. A vast, serpentine dragon of oceanic majesty, her scales shimmering with cosmic patterns, intertwined with an ibis-headed figure whose hands held both a stylus and a caduceus, their forms merging in what appeared to be an act of sacred creation. Before this tablet, a lone figure knelt, their silhouette stark against the shimmering light, hands outstretched towards a swirling vortex of prismatic mist that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. From the depths of this ethereal mist, a low, resonant hum began to emanate, a sound that vibrated not through the air, but through the very fabric of consciousness, a whisper from the moment before thought became form. What forbidden alchemical union between Tiamat, the primordial dragon mother of Babylonian creation, and Thoth, the Egyptian god of wisdom and writing, birthed the human capacity for conscious thought itself? And why was this fundamental truth about our cognitive origins deliberately erased from the records of civilization? What timeless secret did this enigmatic scene conceal, and what profound revelation awaited the one who dared to look beyond the sanitized myths, to perceive the delicate threads of a cosmic conspiracy that shaped human consciousness? My name is Lyra, and the call to something beyond had been a persistent, almost maddening echo within my soul since my earliest memories. It wasn't a voice in the conventional sense, no audible sound, but a deep, undeniable resonance that pulled me towards the hidden currents of reality, towards the whispers of suppressed knowledge, towards the shimmering edges where ancient cosmologies intersected in ways that defied modern understanding. My journey began not in a grand university or prestigious institution, but in the quiet desperation of my own mind, in recurring visions of a vast cosmic ocean where a magnificent dragon goddess swam through the primordial waters, her body containing all potential, all chaos, all creation not yet differentiated. In these visions, I watched as a figure of crystalline intelligence, neither fully human nor fully divine, approached her not with weapons as the Babylonian myths proclaimed, but with reverence, with instruments of measurement and language, with the tools of consciousness itself. These visions were always accompanied by a profound sense of forbidden knowledge, a visceral understanding that something essential about the origin of human thought had been deliberately obscured, rewritten to serve narratives of conquest rather than creation, of domination rather than divine collaboration. It was in an obscure antiquities collection, hidden in the basement of a forgotten museum in the outskirts of Cairo, its existence barely documented in outdated catalogues, that I stumbled upon a clay tablet that would shatter everything. Its surface, covered in a hybrid script that seemed to merge cuneiform with hieroglyphics in ways no mainstream scholar acknowledged as possible, spoke of the forbidden alchemy, a cosmic union between Tiamat and Thoth that created the human mind. The tablet hinted that before the patriarchal rewrites, before the epic of Enuma Elish proclaimed Marduk's violent conquest of Tiamat, there existed an older tradition, a gnosis carefully preserved by those who understood that human consciousness was not a gradual evolutionary accident, but the result of a deliberate alchemical fusion between the primordial chaos represented by Tiamat and the ordering principle represented by Thoth. The text described how Tiamat, the dragon mother of the salt waters, embodied pure potential, undifferentiated consciousness, the quantum field of infinite possibility. Thoth, the divine scribe, represented measurement, differentiation, language, mathematics, the capacity to distinguish this from that, to create boundaries within the boundless. Their union, the tablet proclaimed with startling clarity, was not violent but sacred, an alchemical marriage that transformed raw cosmic potential into structured awareness, birthing the unique human capacity for symbolic thought, for language, for self-reflection. This museum basement, with its scent of dust and neglected treasures, its shelves laden with artifacts that challenged official narratives, became my first sacred setting, a silent sanctuary where the seeds of my true quest were sown. The path unveiled by this hybrid tablet and my recurring visions was not one of comfortable academic research, but a harrowing journey into territories where archaeology, mythology, neuroscience, and mysticism converged in ways that threatened established paradigms. Each symbol deciphered, each correlation discovered between ancient texts and modern understanding of consciousness, each meditation that took me deeper into the mystery, brought wave after wave of resistance. There was the intellectual doubt that whispered of pseudoscience and fantasy, of connecting dots that responsible scholars would never dare connect, abandoning the safety of specialized disciplines for dangerous interdisciplinary speculation. There was the profound cognitive dissonance of reconciling what I was discovering with everything modern education proclaimed about the gradual evolution of human consciousness, with the neat narrative of humans slowly, accidentally developing language and abstract thought over millions of years. And there was the existential terror of confronting what it meant if human consciousness was not an accident, but an engineered fusion, if our very capacity for thought was the result of an alchemical process between cosmic forces we'd been taught to see as mythological rather than real. External resistances manifested in predictable yet still painful ways. Academic advisors who warned that pursuing such fringe connections would destroy any chance at a legitimate career. Archaeologists who refused to even examine the hybrid tablet because it obviously couldn't be authentic. Neuroscientists who laughed at the suggestion that ancient cosmological myths might encode actual information about the origin of consciousness. Yet there were also unexpected allies, voices from the margins. An elderly Egyptologist, retired and therefore free to speak honestly, who confided over tea in a dimly lit cafe, "Everyone who studies Thoth deeply eventually realizes something doesn't add up." He appears suddenly in Egyptian cosmology, fully formed, bringing writing, mathematics, magic, measurement. There's no developmental mythology around him. It's as if he, or what he represents, came from elsewhere. And if you look at the oldest texts about Tiamat, before the Babylonians rewrote her as chaotic evil to be destroyed, she's described as the mother of consciousness itself, the womb from which even the gods emerged. What if, the old scholar leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper, what if these weren't just stories? What if they were encoding an actual process, an actual event? I learned through painstaking research that the demonization of Tiamat paralleled the suppression of the divine feminine across multiple cultures, that transforming her from creative mother to chaos monster served specific political and religious purposes. I discovered that Thoth's associations with alchemy, magic, and the creation of language linked him to traditions of consciousness transformation across cultures. The more I researched, the more the forbidden alchemy revealed itself not as metaphor but as description, encoded in the only language available to ancient peoples, myth. The climax arrived not in any physical location, but in a state of consciousness I had never before accessed, induced through a combination of meditation, sensory deprivation, and what I can only describe as a moment of cosmic grace. I had been working for weeks on translating the final section of the hybrid tablet, staying awake for days at a time, driven by an obsession I couldn't name. The night it happened, I was alone in my study, the tablet's image projected on my wall, my notes scattered everywhere in seeming chaos that somehow mirrored the primordial state Tiamat represented. As exhaustion finally overwhelmed me, and I slipped into a state between waking and sleep, the vision exploded through my consciousness with the force of a supernova. I was no longer in my body, no longer bound by individual perspective. I experienced myself as vast, oceanic, containing multitudes, every possibility existing simultaneously without contradiction. I was Tiamat, the primordial waters, the salt sea of pure potential, consciousness undifferentiated, infinite but formless, powerful beyond measure, yet unable to know itself because knowing requires distinction. And there was no distinction, only unity, only oneness, only the eternal now of being everything and therefore nothing specific. In this state, there was no suffering but also no joy, no darkness but also no light, because these required differentiation, required the capacity to distinguish this from that. Then, like a beam of crystalline intelligence piercing the primordial waters, came the Thothian principle, not as a being, but as a function, as the capacity for measurement, for distinction, for language, for mathematics, for the drawing of boundaries within the infinite. I felt this principle enter the oceanic consciousness, not violently as later myths would claim, but as a lover, as a partner in sacred creation. And in the moment of their union, in the alchemical fusion of formless potential with structured intelligence, something entirely new was born. Reflective consciousness, the capacity to be aware of being aware, to think about thinking, to use symbols to represent reality, and then to manipulate those symbols to create new realities. I understood with shattering clarity that this was the forbidden alchemy. This was what created the human mind. Human consciousness was not simply evolved neural complexity, but the offspring of a cosmic union between chaos and order, between the infinite potential represented by the Dragon Mother and the differentiating intelligence represented by the divine scribe. Every human capacity for symbolic thought, for language, for mathematics, for self-reflection, for imagination, flowed from this alchemical marriage. The vision showed me why this truth had to be suppressed, because it meant human consciousness was not a happy accident to be grateful for, not a gradual evolution to be proud of, but a deliberate creation, an engineered fusion. And acknowledging this would force questions about who or what did the engineering, what purpose it served, what we were meant to become. The patriarchal rewrites that transformed Tiamat into a monster to be slain and ignored the collaboration with Thoth served to obscure human origins, to make us forget we were the children of a dragon mother and a divine intelligence, to make us believe consciousness arose from matter alone through blind chance. When I finally returned to ordinary consciousness, I was weeping, my body shaking, my entire understanding of reality reconstructed from its foundations. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our content. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to know. The revelation did not bring peace, but rather a profound solitude, the isolation of seeing what cannot be unseen, of knowing what cannot be unknown. The world continued its familiar patterns, but I moved through it like a ghost, inhabiting a different reality than those around me. I chose a period of deep contemplation and integration, withdrawing from the academic circles that had never fully accepted me anyway, spending months in silence, allowing the implications to settle into every level of my being. I walked beside the ocean, feeling my kinship with the primordial waters, understanding viscerally that the salt in my blood and tears was the same salt that filled Tiamat's cosmic seas. I studied linguistics, mathematics, and neuroscience with new eyes, seeing in every human capacity for symbolic thought the signature of the forbidden alchemy. I read the creation myths of diverse cultures, finding echoes of the same story told in different languages. A primordial dragon or serpent of chaos or potential, a god or goddess of order or intelligence, and from their interaction, the birth of consciousness, of humanity, of the world as we know it. The Chinese had their own versions with dragons representing wisdom and cosmic force. The Gnostics spoke of Sophia, divine wisdom, whose passion created the material world. The alchemists encoded the same process in their seemingly nonsensical symbolism. The marriage of Sol and Luna, Mercury and Sulfur, the union of opposites that produces the philosopher's stone, the transformed consciousness. I spoke to almost no one during this period, but when I did, I spoke in careful parables and questions rather than proclamations, understanding that truth of this magnitude could not be given, only recognized by those ready to see. An encounter with a quantum physicist at a cafe accidentally illustrated the parallel between ancient gnosis and modern science. She was explaining entanglement and superposition, how particles exist in all possible states until observed, how measurement itself creates reality. What you're describing, I said quietly, sounds like what the Babylonians encoded in the story of Tiamat. Pure potential, all possibilities existing simultaneously until the principle of distinction, of measurement, interacts with it, collapsing the wave function into specific reality. She stared at me, silent for a long moment, then whispered, "My God, they knew. Somehow, they knew." The forbidden alchemy was revealing itself to be not just historical or mythological truth, but a description of the fundamental nature of consciousness and reality itself, encoded in the only language available before modern physics. My time in contemplative solitude crystallized a decision. I could not prove what I had experienced in ways that would satisfy conventional scholarship, but neither could I remain silent about a truth that explained so much about the human condition, about our strange dual nature, forever caught between chaos and order, infinity and specificity, the oceanic and the individual. I began to write. Not academic papers that would be rejected by journals, but books, essays, stories that encoded the forbidden alchemy in narrative, making it accessible to those whose souls already carried the seed of remembering. I created art that depicted Tiamat and Thoth not as enemies or as mere myth, but as the cosmic mother and father of human consciousness, their union sacred, their separation in later patriarchal myths, a tragedy that mirrored humanity's own fragmentation, our forgetting of our origins in divine collaboration rather than violent conquest. I understood that my role was not to convince, but to remind, not to prove, but to resonate, offering the vision to those whose own inner knowing would recognize its truth. I spoke at small gatherings, not proclaiming certainty, but sharing the journey, the questions, the implications. What if, I would ask, human consciousness was not an accident, but a creation? What if we are the children of a cosmic union between infinite potential and structured intelligence? What would that mean for how we understand ourselves, our purpose, our potential? I watched as some listeners' eyes would suddenly widen, as if remembering something they had always known but forgotten, as if recognizing a truth that resonated in their bones, their blood, their very capacity for thought itself. I compiled a codex richly illustrated with images of the Dragon Mother and the ibis-headed scribe in sacred union, their merger producing the golden child of human consciousness. This codex I distributed freely online, knowing it would find those who needed it, trusting that the forbidden alchemy was ready to be remembered by a humanity perhaps finally mature enough to handle the implications. I understood that the ultimate truth of our origins could not be proven by external evidence alone, but would be recognized through internal resonance, through the part of us that still remembers the cosmic waters, the part that still carries the Thothian capacity for distinction and measurement, the marriage of these two within each human being who might, in recognizing their own nature as alchemical fusion, begin to consciously participate in the ongoing creation. And on a night when the stars seemed particularly bright, standing at the edge of the ocean, feeling the salt spray on my face, I spoke aloud to the darkness. Mother Tiamat, Father Thoth, I remember. I remember the forbidden alchemy. I remember that I am your child, that every human is your child, born of chaos and order, potential and actuality, the infinite and the specific. May we remember, may we honor both our sources. May we become what you intended, conscious co-creators, bridges between the formless and the formed, inheritors of divine potential and divine intelligence, finally whole. And in that moment, I swear I felt the universe itself shiver with recognition, as if something long dormant was beginning to stir, as if the forbidden alchemy was ready to be remembered, as if humanity stood on the threshold of reclaiming its true nature as the alchemical offspring of forces we had been taught to fear or forget, ready perhaps to finally understand what we truly are and what we might yet become. And if you liked this story, you will definitely love the next one that's appearing on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and activate the notifications. See you in the next one.